Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
You ready? Let's go.
That's right. It's time to go. It's go time, mister. It's the Fantasy Greek starts and sits in 60 minutes here on Late Night Sports Radio. I am Keith Grieve from 87sportsfans.com. Just grateful to be in the presence of the Fantasy Greek himself, Jim Sarantias from thefantasygreek.com. Jim, happy Wednesday, happy week 6. How you doing?
Ow, ow! Keith, I'm doing great.
What was that?
That was just my, effort at being exhilarated. It's hump day. I'm ready to go. Man, we are so close to week 6 football. Check it.
Okay, here, I can't help it. I'm sorry. I hate to break this out so soon. Yeah, no, we're not going with the ow thing ever again. Just
okay. I'm just doing my best.
Hey, you provided entertainment, and so therefore, kudos to you. But
seriously, I'm usually not very funny, and that's because I just don't try.
Usually, you're the straight man, just shaking your head and just kind of wincing at the bad jokes that I put together. But hey, it is what it is. Using better choice of words than Greg Hardy, this is the Fantasy Greek starts and sits in 60 minutes. And if you are new to the show, kids, the phone number is 585-633-7487. That's 585-633-7487. Use that number if you have any individual fantasy football line of questions that you want to run by Jim, and he will bless you with his knowledge. Or if you are not the vocal type, you can also hit the Twitter there and use the hashtag AskTFG. That's Ask, capital T, capital F, capital G. And we will get to your question, your issue, as time allows. We have 14 games to get through on the slate for this week, and it begins in the Big Easy with the Atlanta Falcons traveling to the New Orleans Saints on Thursday night. The 5-0 Falcons, a real nice turnaround story for new head coach Dan Quinn and company. They did get a little lucky last week. The Redskins played them tough. Tip your cap. In Atlanta, nonetheless, and they needed a gimme pick 6 on a bad throw by Kirk Cousins for a variety of reasons. The Saints they're just a giant mess, and we have to start thinking about whether it's time to really start seriously talking about life after Sean Payton. They are 1-4, like I said. They are horrible on defense. They don't run the ball. They pass for a decent amount of yards, but they don't score any points, and they give up a ton. This is a gimme game on the road. I'm picking the Falcons.
Yeah, this really is a gimme game. The Saints are struggling terribly in all aspects of their defense. Whether it's from the quarterback to the running back to the wide receivers. I mean, you can just look at your Falcons and start them all. Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Leonard Hankerson, Devonta Freeman. Even Jacob Tamme makes for – he's a borderline TE1. I do like him this week because the Saints gave up the 3rd most fantasy points. I like him also because they've the passing offense has become Julio Jones and Leonard Hankerson, and Tamme's picking up the rest with sort of Roddy White, the odd man out. So you can play him if you need to. And I hate saying it, I think Tevin Coleman's going to make some noise. The Saints are giving up 136 rush yards per game, plus 1 TD per game on the ground, and yet they're giving up 10 fantasy points, which I think suggests that there's a little bit more to be had. But if you're looking at Tevin Coleman, he's your last resort, not your first. For Saints, Mark Ingram got a great start as the Falcons are giving up the most fantasy points to running backs. I know they only give up 78 yards on the ground, but they've given up 8 TDs to date, and they're giving a bunch through the air, so I like him this week. I think C.J. Spiller makes for a good flex play that nobody's going to be talking about this week. If you're going to start anybody from the Saints in terms of running wide receivers, start Willie Snead. The Falcons are still giving up 288 through the air. And Snead last week really did a nice job. I think he had, 130, 140, Keith, something like that.
In that vicinity.
in that vicinity. So I think Willie Snead has clearly established himself as the more productive of the two main wide receivers, Brandon Cooks, who also makes for a start. But I actually think Cooks is now a wide receiver 3 in fantasy, where Snead's a little bit ahead of him. And then Falcons are going to win this. You can start their defense. If you've been starting them so far, give it another go. Falcons on the road.
Cincinnati travels to the Buffalo Bills. The Bengals are 5-0. The Bills 3-2, and they've been playing tough defense. Winning a squeaker 14-13, though, against the lowly Titans, in a game that I personally thought the Bills would fare a little bit better in. The Bengals, let me tell you a little story, Jim, real briefly, because I tend to get long-winded on this. Yeah. But my overthinking and tinkering with the Cincinnati Bengals cost me my fantasy matchup in our league, well, your league, rather, because I did not like Cincinnati going against Seattle in Seattle last week, so I benched Andy Dalton for Nick Foles. Not because I thought Nick Foles was going to light up the world, but I thought he had a better chance of putting up decent numbers than Andy Dalton. And you know what? Andy Dalton made me look like a jack wagon and a half. 30 of 44 for 331 yards and 2 touchdowns in Seattle, putting up 17 fourth-quarter points to force overtime. Let me tell you something, kids. It is time to take the Cincinnati Bengals seriously. I know they don't do it in the playoffs. They have to prove it first. But it is time to take them seriously. They are one of the better, if not one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the NFL. You look at the Bills, Shady McCoy is out. Carlos Williams is questionable with a concussion. The big news, the quarterback, Tyrod Taylor, with a sprained MCL. E.J. Manuel is looking to start. He is listed at the top of their depth chart at our lads. This does not bode well, even though I was on record before saying E.J. Manuel should have been given the reins in week 1. But coming in this kind of way against the Cincinnati defense that is 10th in points allowed, I'm picking the Bengals to go into the Ralph.
Yeah, Bengals, Keith, you are so right as rain. They're on a roll. They've been a solid team. Their offense is really being pass-driven now, which makes me feel bad for Jeremy Hill, fantasy owners, because he was so highly touted this offseason, and so far he's pretty much been a bust. With exception of maybe 1 or 2 games this season. Against the Bills, uncharacteristically, their pass offense is horrible. They're giving up 275 yards per game and 2 TDs per game. And that's the 11th most fantasy points to QBs and the 8th most to wide receivers. So you know what that means. You're starting Andy Dalton. You're starting A.J. Green. You'd probably look at Marvin Jones as a flex if you wanted to. I really like Gio Bernard this week because everything sets right for it to be the game for the receiving running back, and that's because the Bills are still one of the top defenses against the rush with only 80 rush yards allowed and 2 TDs on the season. Now, because of the disarray and injuries here, there, just the terrible things happening to the Bills right now, it's hard to start any of the Bills except maybe for Charles Clay. I got to think he's still going to be very active in the passing game, and the rest of it is really sort of a crapshoot on what E.J. Manuel does. Could he throw for a couple TDs? I think he can because he's going to be forced to. Who it's going to go to, I'm not sure. Is it Percy Harvin, Robert Woods? I got to think maybe he might feel more comfortable with Robert Woods. If Sammy Watkins made it back, I think it'd be a little bit easier to say. But until then, try to avoid them all and start that Bengals defense. Bengals win.
All right, the Denver Broncos travel to the Cleveland Browns. 5-0 Broncos, 2-3 Browns. And we talk week after week about how Peyton's not Peyton. He's not throwing the touchdown passes as much as he used to. He's throwing more interceptions. The story about the Broncos is not that side of the ball anymore. I'm sorry to say. It is the defense. They are 5th in passing yards allowed. They're 5th in rushing yards allowed. They are 2nd in scoring. They are going into Cleveland. Look, every year that we've done this picks thing, I have always tried to give the home team a little bit more weight, and now this is like the 3rd road team I'm picking. The Broncos are going to go in there, and Josh McCown is not going to know what hit him. It's not going to be a blowout game, but because the Denver offense is struggling as much as it is, and I think Cleveland is better on defense than their stats would make you believe, but the Broncos will still win this game.
Isn't that amazing? For all the naysayers for Peyton Manning, I doubt that we'll find anybody out there that will say the Broncos will lose to the Browns. And I still think Peyton Manning's a good quarterback. For some reason, I meant to look into this, Keith, and it'd be interesting maybe for Monday's show that we discussed the history of the Browns playing the Raiders in Oakland. So I'm going to say Manning has struggled there before. And this is nothing new. And plus, Jack Del Rio was the former defensive coordinator for the Broncos, so who would know what Manning's about to throw their way in this kind of a game? But that's another story. Peyton Manning is going up against a Browns defense giving up 250 yards passing per game and 2 passing TDs per game. You're starting Peyton Manning. You're starting Demaryius Thomas. You're starting Emmanuel Sanders. Obviously, you're starting the Broncos defense. It's been so good. It's really hard, regardless of how the Browns have done. And we'll talk about that in a second. It's hard. You can't bench the Broncos defense with the way they're playing. I also like to see C.J. Anderson get off the schneid this week. He's believe it or not, still getting more touches than Ronnie Hillman, even though the coaching staff was indicating that Ronnie Hillman would end up getting as many, if not more, touches, and that just hasn't been the case yet. So now, who do you play from the Browns? In fantasy, I think their number one start this week is going to be Duke Johnson, and that's because the Broncos are only giving up 85 rush yards on the ground and barely a TD on the ground. Despite that, you're probably going to play Isaiah Crowell just because it's slim pickings out there, I hate to say. But Duke Johnson should have the better game, and the Broncos are giving up middle-of-the-road fantasy points overall, suggesting that their weakness is the wide receiver, or excuse me, the pass-catching running back. I think you got to play Gary Barnidge because he seems to be fairly matchup-proof so far. Travis Benjamin is certainly a wide receiver 3 consideration, and certainly a flex consideration because of his upside. And for Josh McCown, I have never seen so many people drop a quarterback after 3 games in a row of over 350 yards passing, multiple TDs, than this week. And I don't understand it. Josh McCown went out and made teams look silly, just silly. So here, if you have Josh McCown, what you need to do is understand this. He's done his best against some pretty average teams. Raiders, Chargers, Ravens. Broncos, on the other hand, they've played some pretty average offenses. Ravens, Chiefs, Lions, Vikings, and Raiders. But at the end of the day, you got to sit there and look at this and say, unless I absolutely have to, I need to bench Josh McCown and go with my second option. If you have to play Josh McCown because that's just the way it is in your league, 14-team league, 16-team league, you know what? You could do worse. Get him in there and hope for the best. This is a Broncos defense, Keith, that cannot be denied. And this week, that offense is going to flex its muscle too. Broncos win.
All right, the Chicago Bears travel to the Detroit Lions. The Bears on an upkick, 2 straight wins, albeit dramatic and not necessarily what we would call pretty wins.
But impressive, I think, Keith.
You take it for what it's worth. The way that the Bears closed out the Chiefs, and yes, I know Jamal Charles was lost with an injury, and it was a huge blow to the Chiefs' offense because he's really their only option that has been actually performing as advertised. But the Bears' offense, and particularly on that last touchdown pass from Jay Cutler to Matt Forte, Cutler drops the snap. I uttered a curse word in front of my wife. The children were in the other room, so nobody called Child Protective Services on me. And then he just, off his back foot with somebody diving at his knees, throws an absolute perfect ball in the end zone where only Matt Forte could catch it. And that wouldn't have happened years past. And maybe it's just total crap luck. But now you look at all of the articles, all of the media coverage, and the narrative is starting to turn in favor of Jay Cutler and the Chicago Bears. Maybe they're not as bad as we thought. Maybe Cutler's not as bad as we thought. Maybe Adam Gase is the guy that unlocked the Rosetta Stone to Jay Cutler. It's quite ridiculous, the fact that it's turning so much so fast. That's my point. I'm taking the long road here. But on the other side of that, the Detroit Lions are an absolute mess to the point where last week's blowout loss to the Arizona Cardinals at home was so out of hand that Matthew Stafford got benched for Dan Orlovsky. That says everything you need to know about the 2015 Lions in a nutshell. The Bears are playing inspired ball. They have injuries up and down the offensive line. You have a rookie center, Hronis Grasu, who got his butt handed to him early, but rebounded and kind of got better as the game went on. I wouldn't call it good, but got better. And they're going into Detroit playing an offense that's sputtering. They're 26th in points scored. They pass the ball, but they do not run. And with a running back like Amir Abdullah, that just boggles my mind. But the Bears, they threw 45 times against the Chiefs, mostly because they were trailing for most of the game. But tip your cap to the defense. They shut them out for the second half. So what gives? What's going to happen? I think we're going to see a very close game, a little bit of a slugfest. But you know what? I'm picking the Bears on the road. That's right. They're going to go into Detroit and send them to their 6th straight loss.
Keith, I couldn't agree with you more about the previous game. And I wanted to really go back and look the play-by-plays through the game to see how much the Bears threw before they started throwing. The Bears, in my opinion, are one of the teams that starves they need analytics in their offense. They need somebody to go in there and say, hey, guys, did you realize that the Chiefs give up the most passing touchdowns to opponents through 4 or 5 weeks of play? Because if they knew that, they would have walked in there with a passing offense. I mean, I don't care how tough the team is. They don't give up a bunch of yards, but when it comes to the red zone, they fall apart. So you take your cracks, because when he did that, he was successful. They scored 2 passing touchdowns just like that. So there's something to be said about that. There's something that's there. They're just not executing it. Guys, come over to thefantasygreek.com. We'll explain this to you. Now, turning to our game this week, Keith, I agree with you. I think Bears are primed for another win for just a million reasons. The biggest one is the Lions are giving up just a bunch of touchdowns. They've given up 17 on the season to the Bears 13. The Bears, one of their strongest things, or it's becoming one of the strongest aspects of their team, is starting to become their defense. I mean, you talked about it before. They held this Chiefs team with a healthy Jamal Charles before he got hurt. And they held him to 17 points. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have happened. But they did. So they've got this great defense going up against a sputtering offense or a misfiring offense. I think the Lions can still do some damage because, you play your old opponent, and the one thing we always got to see a lot of was Calvin Johnson. Without Peanut Tillman there, I think Calvin will have his way. Calvin is primed for a good game this week. I don't think they'll give up on Amir Abdullah. They would be stupid to. Certainly, stupidity could outweigh any common sense and reason we have to discuss here. But I think Amir Abdullah's got to be a running back 2 consideration or a flex play consideration for people. Guys, don't give up on Golden Tate. I know the numbers aren't quite there, but his targets are strong. In the 5 games, he had 8, 10, 7. He had 4 2 weeks ago, which isn't very good. But last week he had 18. I mean, the ball's coming his way. It's just a matter of catching it and making something happen. So don't give up on him. Matt Stafford, I think you can give up a little on. The Bears are giving up a bunch of TDs, but if Matt Stafford's not going to take the shots in the red zone, it's hard to lean on him. But I would still keep playing Calvin Johnson. For the Bears, I like Jay Cutler if you need a bye-week quarterback. If Alshon Jeffrey misses this week, I like Marquess Wilson as a wide receiver 3. If Alshon Jeffrey's active, you have got to start him against a passing defense that is giving up the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers, the 9th most fantasy points to running backs, so you start Matt Forte, and start Martellus Bennett because he is literally the most highly targeted Bears receiver on the team. Go Bears. Bear down. Bears win.
All right, the Houston Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. And, I use the analogy way too much. It's like trying to pick which puddle of vomit to lick in this game. But the Texans are apparently going back to Brian Hoyer after Ryan Mallett was concussed and Hoyer came thought he was concussed. I guess he wasn't, but he was injured, and in comes Brian Hoyer, and Brian Hoyer starts zipping the ball all over the place, and so Bill O'Brien's like, hey, why don't we, why doesn't this guy play some more? Maybe we should have maybe we shouldn't have benched him after one freaking game. Anyway, that's just me. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they are the perennial rebuild. They are what they are. They're 27th in the league in points scored. They're 31st in points allowed. Is the return of Arian Foster and Brian Hoyer enough to make this offense jump and shout? Well, DeAndre Hopkins was doing pretty good with Ryan Mallett under center. I only see his value enhanced. I only see the offense getting better, pointed in the right direction, and they still have a better defense than the Jaguars. I'm taking the Texans on the road. It's an all-road team edition of the picks this week.
You know, it was weird. I had, when I was doing my picks initially, I was feeling kind of awkward with the number of road teams I was picking. But in this instance, I am going with the home team Jaguars. I just don't think the Texans have what it takes.
Oh, wow.
I really, really don't. I mean, I just look at these two teams. The Texans have given up 15 TDs on the season to the Jaguars 13. I mean, proof is in the pudding, and I like Brian Hoyer. I think that was the right move. Could I see him throwing 2 TDs this week? Certainly. I mean, the pass defense for the Jaguars, I mean, they're giving up the 14th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. But, you know, and is he a start this week? Sure. But in terms of the game, I just can't see that, and I can't see it because the Texans are giving up the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. They're giving up 225 yards passing and 9 TDs to date. That's almost a guarantee that Blake Bortles will throw 2. 1 Allen Robinson, 1 Allen Hurns. Don't you like how that sounds?
Yes, sure.
Sure. So Blake Bortles is an option this week as long as he's healthy. Obviously, if for some reason he didn't play, all bets are off for the Jaguars. Allen Robinson makes for a wide receiver 2. Allen Hurns makes for a wide receiver 2. Julius Thomas is back and is looking healthy. Hopefully they can get him back into this offense fully this weekend. I like his chances for a score. And for the Texans, I love Arian Foster this week. I think he could really, really make some noise. People, I'm sure, haven't been that excited since he's returned for them. But here, the Jaguars are giving up the 5th most fantasy points, and only 103 yards of that is on the ground. Six rushing TDs. So there's a boatload more points out there through the receiving game. So Arian should look like his old self. And then you keep playing DeAndre Hopkins. The Jaguars have give up 260 passing yards through the air. Hopefully he could tie a TD to that. Look for him to do 130, 150, and maybe 1 score. But I still like the Jaguars here. I really, really do.
Interesting. Very interesting. But the Kansas City Chiefs travel to the Minnesota Vikings. The Chiefs, who are coming apart at the seams, losing Jamal Charles for the season with a blown ACL. Jeremy Maclin was a big free agent signing, but he has been populating milk cartons all over the NFL, as people don't know where he is exactly. Because Alex Smith,
I wasn't sure where you were going.
Alex Smith can't seem to find him, so he's got to be missing. Minnesota, you know, at least they have Teddy Bridgewater. At least they have that going for them. Oh, and Adrian Peterson runs like a beast at home. He's unstoppable. As lackluster as the Vikings' offense has been as far as scoring points, their defense is pretty good, pretty stout, if you will. I'm going to take Minnesota to drive the Chiefs to 1-5. Let's see if we can get Andy Reid fired by midseason.
Yeah, you know, when I was doing the game review for this, I thought to myself, Andy Reid is going to be on the hot seat this season, and he's going to have a lot of explaining to do why it is they couldn't take this team with Jeremy Maclin, with Travis Kelce, with Jamal Charles for as long as they had him, and with one of the 2 running backs that they've got sitting in the stable that they're going to try and figure out which one's the better of the 2. And I know the answer to it. I think the people at home know the answer to it, but Andy Reid doesn't seem to. And try and explain this to ownership why it is. Not only did they miss the playoffs, but had a losing record. But that is for the end of the season. I agree with you, Keith. I like the Vikings coming out of their bye week. They're going to be rested, 2 weeks to prepare for this game. They don't have to face Jamal Charles. They'll have Charcandrick West and Niall Davis. You know, from a fantasy perspective, I think you got to look at Charcandrick West as an RB2 at best because, I mean, we know Niall Davis is going to get some work. So how much of it, who knows? But you kind of have to start him because Andy Reid likes him. He's going to give him some shots, and if that means that they've got to give him 20 shots before, in order to see whether West succeeds or not, that's worthwhile in fantasy. I like Jeremy Maclin this week against the Vikings. Even though I don't like his chances of scoring with the Vikings only giving up 5 pass TDs, they do give up 230 yards for the air, so I could see him getting a big chunk of that. I like Travis Kelce, obviously. Alex Smith, just go ahead and sit him. This is not a good matchup for him. The Vikings are stout against quarterbacks in fantasy. They're one of the top 6 defenses against the position. For the Vikings, Teddy Bridgewater has a great matchup. If you need a bye-week quarterback or your other quarterback's got a tough matchup, consider them. The Chiefs are allowing 13 passing TDs. I think it's the most in the NFL. If not, it's the second most. In 285 yards through the air. That is the most fantasy points to the position. Adrian Peterson should be a lock to get 120 and a score this week. Mike Wallace is a really great play, but today I saw that he's actually got a brace on his leg, and he sounds somewhat limited. So if he can't go, things are going to be wide open for Kyle Rudolph and Stephon Diggs, who 2 weeks ago, because of injuries to Jarius Wright and Charles Johnson, got a shot. He got himself 8 targets, 6 catches, and about 80 yards receiving. That's enough to be a flex consideration in fantasy. And one of the best defenses coming out of this bye week, I think for the next several weeks, Vikings. Play them this weekend against a Chiefs team missing Jamal Charles, can't throw the football, don't know what's going on with their running game, and traveling on the road to Minneapolis. Vikings, Keith. Vikings. We need that horn sound in the background at that point.
No, as a Bears fan, I just can't do it.
Oh, come on.
The Washington Redskins travel to the New York Jets. Jets 3-1. Last game was against the Dolphins in London. You'll remember that as Joe Philbin's last game as a head coach. But now they come back stateside to the home field, and they're taking on the Redskins, who are 2-3, but they are better than that record. Make no mistake about it. They are actually 12th in defensive points allowed. Again, the problem with this team is they just don't score a lot of points. Kirk Cousins is as up and down as an elevator. The Jets, on the other hand, they are the league's top defense where it counts, and that's points. They're second in passing yards allowed per game, and they are 8th in rushing yards per game. I'm taking the Jets at home, but like I said last night as I sat in for Bob Sullivan on the Box Seats show, which is the best sports gambling show you'll ever listen to, that Jets line at 5.5, if the Redskins are getting 5.5, this is my upset special for the Redskins to cover that point spread, because the Redskins play tougher than they allow. They just don't score enough points. I say they cover that spread, but the Jets win.
Yeah, I like the Jets at home, too. To date, the Redskins have given up, and these are not big numbers by no means. They've given up 9 TDs on the season to the Jets 6. And I just can't see that Redskins offense doing very well against a Jets defense that's number 2 against the rush and number 2 against the pass in fantasy. Just ain't going to happen. Now, that having been said, Pierre Garçon is actually a really good start this week as a wide receiver 3. The Jets do allow 185 yards through the air, and I can see him getting a nice hunk of that. And they do potentially give up almost 1 TD per game. Or actually, no, they do. 1 TD per game to the position. So I like his chances. I also like the Redskins defense as well as the Jets. I think this is a defensive battle. The Redskins the last 2 weeks have actually done pretty well in most fantasy setups. I think they've gotten 3 sacks per game, certainly they've held their opponents to 20 points or less, and that's always a good thing. For the Jets, they're going to pass the football. This Redskins defense is, what are they, number 3 against the rush, 97 yards allowed, 2 TDs to date. That's not good. Makes Chris Ivory a real shaky play this week, but it makes Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker really great plays this week. You get both those guys in your lineups in fantasy, and as I mentioned, start the Jets. Keith, what Jets 5-0? What are they going to be after this?
4-1, because they did lose that game to I forget who they lost to now. See, you put me on the spot like this.
I didn't mean to, but here's the point: they're doing great.
Well, now I have to look at it while we're here, real quick here. They lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. That's right. It was a game that I didn't think they should have lost. And I was right. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will head through the second half of the schedule. 585-633-7487 with your lineup questions and concerns, or hashtag AskTFG. We'll be right back, folks. This is the Fantasy Greeks. Starts and sits in 60 minutes on Late Night Sports Radio.
Maybe I could waiting for you. So come on, break the rules. The time is right, the time's tonight. Let it start and you won't stop. Let it start and I won't stop. We'll never stop. Let it start and we won't stop because this night belongs to us. We'll never stop because this night is just for us. We'll never
Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
The Fantasy Greek starts and sits in 60 minutes here on Late Night Sports Radio every Wednesday night at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. We take your lineup questions and concerns. 585-633-7487, 585-633-7487. And after the show, if you're catching it on demand, things change, injury reports change, get updated. Head over to thefantasygreek.com, get yourself a Skybox membership, and get all of the latest insight and information that you can to just win your league like a boss. That's thefantasygreek.com. Like a boss.
I like how you said that.
Thanks.
You said that like you were the boss.
It was all completely improv too.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
that's good.
So.
I like that.
All right, back on the scene, crispy and clean. The Arizona Cardinals travel to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger practiced today, and everyone's like, "Oh, is he back?" And they're like, "No, everyone, just take your time here. Take your time." So, I'm going to make my prediction assuming that Ben Roethlisberger does not come back. Mike Vick struggled with a Chargers defense that is not the Arizona Cardinals defense. Let's just put it that way and put it lightly. Although they did come back, albeit with a huge part by Le'Veon Bell, who is very quickly making a case to be the best running back in the game if he's not there already. The Arizona Cardinals are 4-1. Carson Palmer had a very quick day against the Lions, only 11 of 14 for 161 yards, but he did throw 3 touchdowns before they decided that it just wasn't worth it to try to score anymore because they were winning so bad. Chris Johnson has had his career resurrected, although Andre Ellington is reportedly back in the mix. Even though it's in Pittsburgh, a tough place to play, a whole lot of pride, and I don't think the Steelers have played all as bad as I thought they would without Roethlisberger. I just think Arizona plays defense too well, and I'm going to pick the Cardinals on the road.
Yeah, boy, that Cardinals team, I mean, if you had told me that they would be as good as they are and Carson Palmer would be as good as he is, and Larry Fitzgerald would have come back as he has, and Chris Johnson would have even played this year, would have been shocked for you to tell me that. But here they are, and they're going to play a Steelers team which in terms of passing defense, they're horrible, just terrible. 257 yards per game allowed, and just a little bit better than 2 TDs allowed per game, or close to 2 TDs. I'm sorry. Almost 2 TDs allowed per game, Keith. That's enough for me to start Carson Palmer, Larry Fitzgerald, and John Brown without any hesitation. The Steelers do have a better rush defense, allowing only an average of 101 yards per game and just 1 TD on the season. But this Chris Johnson is just doing some amazing things. And in a lean week, you have to play him. And he's a solid RB2. And I think he'll get the majority of touches among the other running backs. Andre Ellington is the only one to consider as a flex spot. And the Cardinals' DST is a weekly must start, especially against a Steelers team being led by Michael Vick. And that having been said, as long as Michael Vick is the quarterback, people who have Antonio Brown and Martavius Bryant are going to suffer. And as of today, I have officially downgraded Antonio Brown. He is a wide receiver 2 at best. If you have a better wide receiver 2, I would seriously consider him. Like, for example, my 2 other wide receivers were DeAndre Hopkins and Brandon Marshall. I would sit him if I only was required to play 2 of them. That's all there is to it. Martavius Bryant, shaky wide receiver 3. And in fact, I'd avoid him. He's boomer or bust. He's going to lay a big goose egg or he's going to get something. And I don't think I'd be very impressed by it to begin with. So that's where we stand with the Steelers wide receivers. Le'Veon Bell, a must start every single week. This is a tough matchup for him. The Cardinals' rush defense is one of the better ones in the league, but they give up a bunch of yardage through the air, so I like Le'Veon Bell to make some noise this week. I'm going to take the Cardinals going away, Keith.
All right, the Miami Dolphins travel to the Tennessee Titans. Both teams 1-3. One of them has a brand new head coach, and that is Dolphins' former assistant, Dan Campbell, who has already tried to reinvigorate the practices and try to toughen these guys up. The Dolphins are a mess. Firing Philbin was the right thing to do, and they're apparently going to get a new voice on the defensive side of the ball, which is good because anytime that you sign a talent like Ndamukong Suh and you make him disappear, you deserve to lose your job. Lou Anarumo is the interim defensive coordinator, as Dan Campbell is also the interim head coach. Bill Lazor stays on as offensive coordinator, and the Dolphins have looked just as bad on offense as they have on defense at times. The Tennessee Titans have been a nice little surprise. They've been a little tougher on defense. I think Marcus Mariota has surprised a lot of people, not lighting the world on fire, but playing a lot better than everyone thought he would for this stage of his rookie season. This game is at home. It's the Dolphins' first game under their new head coach. They might come out with a little bit of fire, but at the end of the day, I just don't think that 2 weeks is enough time for enough change to happen for the Dolphins to get back out of their funk. I'm picking the Titans at home.
Keith, I really like what the Dolphins have done. I'm interested to see how they're going to look. I'm going to take the Dolphins in this one on the road, and I respect the Titans. I think their defense is pretty phenomenal. They've just made some vast improvements. They're one of the top rushing defenses in the league now, one of the top pass defenses in the league now, but they're still giving up a few more touchdowns, or actually one more touchdown than the Dolphins are, which I actually found kind of surprising. I like the chances for the Dolphins defense to actually rebound. I don't think defense, it doesn't take much in terms of getting guys to be motivated, and the one thing they didn't look was motivated under Coach Philbin. So I like to see them turn it around. I like Lamar Miller this week. I think he could easily do 100 yards. Whether he can pop it into the end zone is really a different story because the Titans have only allowed 4 TDs on the season, but his chances are good. I love Jordan Cameron this week. The Titans, they're giving up a bunch of yards to the position in the TD scores tend to go to the tight end, so I like his chances. Ryan Tannehill, I like him too. Because I think he's a guy that even against a tough defense can throw 2 TDs. And for that reason, you have to start Jarvis Landry and Rashard Matthews too. I believe they should be downgraded, though, as more wide receiver 3s. And for the Titans, you look around, and besides their defense, the only player worth playing this week is Antonio Andrews. And I say Antonio Andrews because he's the only one getting the goal line looks. He's gotten a bunch of receiving yards. The Dolphins are struggling against the running back position to the tune of 160 yards, 3 TDs on the season, 11th most fantasy points allowed to the position, and I might even give Bishop Shanky. For me to give him the start, I would really have nothing left to go with. But I do like Antonio Andrews, and I like Marcus Mariota, but just, this is a week I would rather avoid him. I really would. I'll take the Dolphins to bounce back strong this bye week, Keith.
The Carolina Panthers travel to the Seattle Seahawks. The Panthers 4-0. The Seahawks 2-3. The Panthers probably the one undefeated team with the most question marks because we just know what they're dealing with, losing Kelvin Benjamin, and Jericho Quattree is also listed as questionable. How many bullets are left in this gun to go against a Seattle defense that, while they were without Cam Chancellor for the first 2 weeks of the season, you look at their stats to date, they're still 9th in points allowed, 7th in passing yards allowed, 7th in rushing yards allowed. And Carolina, on the other hand, they're 6th in points scored. How is that possible? They're also 4th in defensive points. So they're playing well. They're executing well. They haven't beaten anyone to shake a stick at. They haven't beaten anybody with better than 500 record. As of to date. So what gives here? Well, here's the thing. Let's not forget that the Seahawks just got embarrassed with their fourth quarter defense against the Bengals. Yes, it was on the road, but still, the Bengals should never have been allowed to come back with that kind of flurry. I don't care how good the Bengals are. The Seahawks are a team with pride. They're going to be angry. They're going to be in Seattle. I'm picking the Seahawks to give the Panthers their first loss.
I like the Seahawks at home as well, Keith. Marshawn Lynch is due to come back this week, and if he does in fact come back, it means he's healthy, and it means he's going to come back with a vengeance. He's going to run strong. He's going to run angry, and I would want to be any Panthers defensive lineman if that is the case. That having been said, there's not a whole lot of great fantasy plays in this game. Seahawks defense, Panthers defense, 2 good plays. I like Greg Olsen because the Seahawks have been really weak at defending the position. However, he's likely going to draw the best coverage. Do you sit Greg Olsen? Absolutely not. He easily could make up for it with 80 yards and a score. You know that Cam Newton's going to be looking his way in the red zone, so keep Greg Olsen active. In terms of Seahawks that you can look at and play, I think Doug Baldwin makes for a solid wide receiver 3. Jimmy Graham, I've downgraded him as well, and what I mean by that is I've moved him down my rankings and recognized that, 2 out of every 5 games being good games is not good for a top tight end 1. And there are other tight ends that I would play ahead of Jimmy Graham, so I have ranked him accordingly at thefantasygreek.com, but you can go check that out for yourself. Players you're going to have to choose what you want to do with Cam Newton and Russell Wilson. These are awful, awful, awful matchups for them. Between the two, Cam Newton has the slightly better one, and if I had to pick between the two, I would start him. And then Ted Ginn. I don't think this is a bad play because I don't think he'll demand the best coverage, and eventually Newton's got to go to somebody. Will he score? That's sort of the question. So if you have to play Ginn, you could. But again, there's plenty of players ahead of him. He's more of a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 this week. And lastly, you go sit Jonathan Stewart. In fact, you can go cut him if you want. If you look at his performance through 5 games, he's averaging 35, 36 yards per game, something ridiculous like that. He hasn't even scored a touchdown yet. And he's going up against a Seahawks defense, which is number 1 against the position. Bench Stewart. Seahawks win.
The San Diego Chargers travel to the Green Bay Packers. The Chargers 2-3 and struggling through quicksand, if you will. That's what it feels like to watch the highlights of that team. And the Green Bay Packers are 5-0, one of the darlings of the league, currently ranked 3rd in the latest NFL power rankings to come out at 87sportsfans.com. The thing about the Chargers that's going to make this game interesting is that they don't give up many passing yards a game, and they're going up against Aaron Rodgers. Now, Aaron Rodgers threw for 241 yards on the Rams, who we like to think have a pretty good defense. But Aaron Rodgers was also their leading rusher last week when rushing for 39 yards. So the reason I bring that up is that the Chargers don't really play the run very well on defense. So look, for, Eddie Lacy they're going to be able to get yards in chunks, is my point. And they give up a good amount of points. The Packers, on the other hand, sixth in the league with a +5 takeaway differential, and San Diego's offensive line is less than stellar, to say the least. This game is in Green Bay. The Packers are clicking on all cylinders right now. I'm going to take the Packers.
You know, it's amazing to look at the Packers these days, and actually you can make the argument that their defense is better than their offense right now. It is so good. They are only giving up 186 yards through the air, 5 TDs on the season. Their rush defense is weaker, admittedly, but only 4 TDs on the season, so that's 9 total. 9 total TDs allowed on the season. That is pretty phenomenal. For this game, the thing that we can't account for is Antonio Gates. He had a fantastic game last week, and he's going to sort of put his mark on this game and will give the Chargers a chance, which is why you can't rule Phillip Rivers out. He's a low-end QB1 this week. You're starting Antonio Gates. You're starting Keenan Allen. If I'm picking between Danny Woodhead and Melvin Gordon this week, I'm actually going to go with Melvin Gordon, and here's why. The Packers allow 130 rushes on the ground and almost one rushing TD per game. That is something that is more suited to Melvin Gordon than it is to Danny Woodhead. Danny Woodhead has sort of been a little bit off. I'm not saying you bench him. You can still go to him if you have to. But I like Melvin Gordon between the two. For the Packers, you just keep rolling out your playmakers, Aaron Rodgers, Randall Cobb. Keith, you hit it on the head. Eddie Lacy should blow it up. I mean, the Chargers allow the third most fantasy points to the position, 130 yards rushing, 1 TD, rush TD. And because it's the third most fantasy points, it means they're also allowing a bunch of passing yards. So Eddie Lacy should just blow up the gridiron. He's a top 5 start this week amongst the running backs. You need tight end help this week? Look no further than Richard Rodgers. He's averaging roughly 50 yards a game, and he's had 2 TDs on the season. So, you know, he's boom or bust. But what's nice about you can play him this week is the fact that the Chargers give up the 10th most fantasy points to the position. It's roughly 80 yards worth of fantasy points. And if he can get you the TD too, that'd be just stellar. Start the Packers. Packers win.
The Baltimore Ravens travel to the San Francisco 49ers. Remember when this was a Super Bowl a couple years ago, kids? Yeah, that is. We are a long way from that.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh my gosh, how the mighty have fallen. It was actually my birthday, February 3rd, on 2013, that the Ravens beat the 49ers 34-31 to take the Super Bowl championship trophy home. And now we look at these two teams, both 1-4. The Niners can't score, and they get shredded on defense. The Ravens at least can score points, but that Ravens defense is not how you usually, or not what we're used to seeing out of this group. 25th in the league in points allowed. The thing here, kids, is that the 49ers are so bad. They're so bad at throwing the ball that you have to start really wondering if Colin Kaepernick is even worth hanging on for, let alone that big contract. Forget about it, the length of that contract. Is it really worth it to keep this guy around? They're 31st in the league in passing yards per game, but they're 5th in the league in rushing yards. So one half of the offense is executing, is fine. And one of these things is not like the other. Remember that from Sesame Street? Yeah, that's where we're at with the 49ers right now. They are so dysfunctional in every facet of the game except for running the football. The Ravens, on the other hand, you know, they're middle of the road. They give up about 100 yards a game on the ground. And they can get shredded through the air. So do I go on a limb and pick the 49ers to win this game simply because these are two bad teams and I'm going to go with the home team? No, I'm still going to take Joe Flacco over Colin Kaepernick any day of the week and twice this Sunday. I'm picking the Ravens on the road.
You know, Keith, I am so glad that this show is being recorded because this is the first time you and I have disagreed on so many games. Because I'm taking 49ers at home. I don't know what you're talking about.
You know, I can't really put a science to my pick.
And that's okay. I understand that. Look, when I did I actually did the game preview in the Skybox area for thefantasygreek.com this past week for the Giants and the 49ers. And I put it this way, I did the 49ers part. I pointed out there something really significant about Colin Kaepernick's performances, and it was he struggled against really good defenses. I mean, this isn't Colin Kaepernick just bad everywhere he went. He actually had some pretty good defenses that he played against the first few weeks, and the one defense which wasn't good and has never been any good was the Steelers. And in that game, he kicked butt, 335 yards and 2 TDs. The other teams he played, Minnesota, good defense. Cardinals, spectacular defense. Packers, awesome defense. And in those games, his best game was 165 yards. So, fast forward, get to the Giants. The guy puts up a 262, 2-0 stat line. That's outstanding. He's now going against a Ravens team that got clubbed the last time they made the East Coast trip to the West Coast to play the Oakland Raiders. The Ravens are giving up the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks, 278 yards per game, almost 2 TDs per game. In terms of the running game, they're giving up 100 yards on the ground on average and almost 1 TD. So I like Colin Kaepernick this week. I like Carlos Hyde this week, and I love Anquan Boldin this week, especially in daily games. But you can go to Colin Kaepernick if you have to, and Carlos Hyde and Anquan Boldin are must-starts. If you need help at the quarterback position, Flacco is an option. I mean, this 49ers team, it's not like their pass defense is very good, giving up almost 300 yards through the air and almost 2 TDs per game. So you can go with Flacco. If Steve Smith's active, you got to play him and bench Kamara Aiken. But if Steve Smith's not active, start Kamara Aiken again. I mean, he did just fine. On 8 targets, he had 6 receptions and 85 yards last week. Justin Forsett is a must-start against a fairly weak 49ers rush defense. And if Forsett should miss because of his ankle sprain that we learned about late in the game last week, then Javorius Allen, or depending on your website, you might be able to find it by Buck Allen, becomes an instant must-start this week. But, Keith, I got to tell you, I really think this is the difference. Colin Kaepernick can play against the bad pass defenses, and this is one of them.
49ers ranked dead last in the power rankings. They came out at 87sportsfans.com for the record. For the record. All right, New England Patriots at the Indianapolis Colts. This is the game we've all been waiting for, kids. One more week to talk about Deflategate, right? Right. Yes, sure, if you say so. Andrew Luck is still listed as questionable according to ProFootballReference.com. I am going to expect him to play in this game, but I'm not a doctor. I only play one on the radio. The New England Patriots are, again, like the Green Bay Packers, they are hitting on all cylinders, second in the league in points scored, and they are stingy, seventh in scoring defense. Forget about the yards on defense. They don't allow teams to score. That is all that matters. They pass the ball all over the place. First in the league, 331 yards passing per game. Guess what, kids? The Colts, 286 a game. That's good for 28th in the league. Andrew Luck may give this team a spark, but there is no way they win this game. The Patriots team is a machine. This Patriots team right now is a machine, and I'm picking the Pats.
I don't care who starts for the Colts. I think the Patriots, I mean, they're, until somebody gets up, punches him in the face, calls Tom Brady a cheater on the field, and really gets into his head, they're not going to be denied. They have beaten the Colts many times over, and every time they beat them, they don't just beat them in that game. They beat them for the next game or two. That's how badly they beat them. They're just in their heads. And so I think even in Indianapolis, this is a Colts team. Even if Andrew Luck starts, they're going to struggle. Tom Brady must start. Julian Edelman, the best wide receiver, that makes Tom Brady look good. And makes people forget that he's got other people on the field to throw to. Rob Gronkowski, ditto. Patriots must start against the Colts. I like Deion Lewis and LeGarrette Blount this week. This is a Colts team that's given up the 13th most fantasy points to the position. It's a combination of 112 rushing yards, almost 1 rush TD per game, as well as a bunch of receiving yards. So both these guys should make some noise. They're both startable, especially down the stretch, because I really think the Patriots are going to pull away, and it's going to be one of those. They're just going to keep pouring it on. Now, if Andrew Luck is healthy, start him. You have to. You have to start Frank Gore. You have to start T.Y. Hilton. You have to start Dante Moncrief. As far as Andre Johnson is concerned, a bunch of people added him this week. I don't know that was a very good move. Last week was his first game that he actually did something that was fantasy relevant. Otherwise, it's been all T.Y. Hilton and all Dante Moncrief. And Andrew Luck wasn't even in the game last week. So it's really hard to believe that Andre Johnson will be incorporated like he was last week if Andrew Luck plays. I'm sorry to the Colts fans that I'm picking the Patriots, but I really do think this is a team that's in the stratosphere compared to the Colts right now. And on top of it, they're coming up. Wait, they're not coming off their bye. Last week was a bye week. What the hell? Patriots win.
Wow, that was fantastic. So,
thanks, man.
For the final game of the Monday Nighter, the New York Giants travel to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles, who I believe are playing for not only Chip Kelly's job this season, but Chip Kelly's reputation. He went and totally remade this roster, and they struggled mightily the first couple weeks of the season. The Giants, on the other hand, speaking of struggling early, if they don't blow those first 2 games of the season with poor clock management, this team is undefeated, 5-0, and we're talking about, whoa, what a turnaround the Giants have made this year. But that being said, they lost the games. They're 3-2. The surprising part is that the home team in the NFL gets 3 points with the betting lines, and the Eagles have added a half a point to that. So somehow somebody thinks the Eagles are that much better than the Giants. I don't. You can't. They don't pass the eyeball test for me. Watching this team play, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in the Eagles. They execute well on defense, but the offense with Sam Bradford it just doesn't score enough points, I don't think. And the Giants, they're very similar, but the Giants, they don't allow very many rushing yards on the game. They may get shredded in the secondary, but I don't think Sam Bradford is the kind of quarterback with this receiving core that can make them hurt. I'm going to pick the Giants to go into Philly and make some Eagles fans very upset.
Keith, you are wrong again. Seriously, we've disagreed like over half the games. This is a first.
We're going to need to do a 2-hour show next week just to go over this week's games before we...
That's right. Because, well, here, I'm going to take the Eagles at home. The Eagles right now have only allowed 9 TDs on the season, the Giants 11. I think the Eagles suffered from just things were not coming together, miscommunication. But Sam Bradford seems to have put the house in order, and he's lucky to get another favorable matchup against a Giants team giving up the most pass yards in the league, 304, giving up 2 TDs per game. So I like Sam Bradford, definitely Jordan Matthews. I'd like to recommend Brent Selleck or Zach Ertz, because they give up the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. But right now, that's really difficult to do since neither one of them is a complete standout. But I would lean towards Brent Selleck only because he seems to be targeted more in the red zone. The Eagles' defense, I like them, but is a low-end play. DeMarco Murray's decent. The reason why I say decent, the Giants, they have a really good rush defense. 81 yards are allowed, only 3 TDs on the season. But certainly it intimates that he could get you a touchdown score. I kind of like Ryan Matthews this week because the Giants, after you look at that rushing figure, they're giving up the 6th most fantasy points to the running back position. That means there's a boatload of yards that are going to the running backs through the passing. And I think Ryan Matthews sits right, so I like to see him contributing. So he's a flex option if you need one. For the Giants, look, I'm taking the Eagles, but this is going to be a high-scoring game. In fact, this will be a fantasy bonanza where you will see asteroid fantasy points scored left and right. Get your guys in there because this should be like a pinball machine type of game. Eli Manning's a great start. Odell Beckham is a great start. If Ruben Randall's healthy, I'd start him. If he's not, then I might avoid the other guys because I think the ball will get spread around, even though that should boost Larry Donnell's value. And certainly Shane Vereen is a must-play in this scenario. Rashad Jennings, he'll get his, but the Eagles are pretty good defending the position. 97 yards allowed on average per game and only one rushing TD to date. Boy, NFC East, man, this is going to be a great game, but I'm gonna side with those Philadelphia Eagles on this one, Keith.
All right, and with that, we are out of time. This has been one fantastic, fan-packed 60 minutes of football talk here. For Jim Sarantias from thefantasygreek.com, head over to that site, kids, and get yourself a Skybox membership quick before the Thursday night games roll out. You could be up to date and win your league. Own it like a boss. I'm Keith Green from 87sportsfans.com. Tomorrow night on Late Night Sports Radio, we have the Johnny Bobo Show, some great Major League Baseball talk to go along with the more fantasy football talk. And we'll see you there 10 p.m. Eastern Time at LateNightSportsRadio.com.
The party's over.